Hello, my name is Rob Hodgman. I'm the Senior Aviation Planner for the Washington State Department of Transportation. I appreciate the opportunity to present to you today about the Washington Aviation System Plan. The agenda I'm going to cover today, I'm going to talk about the study background, context, and framework, touch on the study elements, spend a little bit of time on aviation system goals, objectives, and performance measures, talk about the new airport classifications, discuss the tie of airports and classifications to airport metrics, briefly touch on the emerging issues, which then will feed into alternative strategies, a little bit on modal connections, and then finish up with policy recommendations. But first, I want to start out and talk about a little bit about the background. Oftentimes, there's a little bit of confusion about what a system plan is. Most people understand airport master planning, and so what I've got on the screen here is kind of a contrast. These are from the FAA advisory circulars of what an aviation system plan is versus what an airport master plan is. And really, in simplest form, a system plan is studying the system, all of the airports, and in Washington State, that's 137 public use airports, in order to determine how those airports can best work together in any future developments that need to be considered. Whereas an airport master plan is really for one specific airport and is the airport sponsor strategy for moving that airport into the future. I also want to talk a little bit about why we do system plans. Normally the FAA asks state aeronautics departments to do system plans about every 5 years or so. The last one we did in WashDOT was in 2009. It was a long-term air transportation study. And that system plan was legislatively directed and specified that the LATs look at 4 geographical regions within Washington State. So the Seattle metropolitan area, Southwest Washington, Tri-Cities, and Spokane. And it also specified that we take a close look at commercial air passenger service. In contrast, the WASP, the Washington Aviation System Plan, is not legislatively directed, and it does not, there is no specified task of looking at either a geographical region or, in particular, at commercial service. Instead, the WASP is integrating the 17 aviation activities that were developed in the 2012 Aviation Economic Impact Study and applying those through the study elements to the 137 public use airports. So the purpose of the WASP is to examine the interaction of the system of airports in order to provide the resources to leadership, government agencies, planners at the regional and the local level. It is really not meant to be a long-term capacity study, and in particular not really geared specifically towards SeaTac or any of the other large commercial service areas. It really is to examine the 137 public use airports and the 17 aviation activities. So these are the study elements, and if you're familiar with master planning, these you'll recognize these. Inventory, forecast, capacity analysis. You can see here we've got performance objectives and measures and standards. Some intermodal integration, sustainability considerations, and then the indeliverable, of course, which is policy recommendations. This is Washington State's aviation system. You can see wide dispersion across the state, all 137 airports. The airports in the dark blue are the NIPIAS, that's the National Plan of Integrated Airport Systems, and those are airports that are eligible for both federal and state funding. And then the airports in the green are not in the NIPIAS, and those airports are eligible for state funding. And these are the 17 aviation activities that were developed in the 2012 Aviation Economic Impact Study. And you can see, this makes kind of common sense. Those activities that you would expect to occur at airports are pretty well covered here. And we've been using those throughout the years on a number of studies because these really speak to the ground truth of what's happening at airports. And so the system plan examined all 17 aviation activities at all 137 public use airports. This is an interesting chart. It reflects, again, a cross-statewide look at the aviation activities, and there's a couple that really jump out. Emergency medical aircraft operations, 76%. So that means 76% of the airports surveyed have this activity at their airport. And here again, pilot flight training, 70%. And down here at the bottom, personal transportation, 69%. So you can see from a statewide perspective, this is a very helpful guide to help WSDOT and our partners understand what the needs of the airport users are. I mentioned in the agenda the goals, objectives, and performance measures. So these are the 8 goals that were developed by our Aviation System Advisory Committee, and they are prioritized from most to least important by the Advisory Committee. So of course, aeronautical and airport safety is at the top, with economic development and vitality a close second. Drill down into those a little bit. So I've already talked about aeronautic and airport safety, economic development. Third on the list, education, outreach, and community engagement, infrastructure improvement, preservation, and capacity, aviation innovation, and we're going to talk a little bit about that, modal mobility, stewardship, and sustainability. I also mentioned that we're introducing a new set of airport classifications, so that's what you see reflected here. It's very similar in many ways to the previous airport classifications. You can see down here on the left side the numbering system, and what we found as we developed this new airport classification system is that most of the airports still remained in the same level of classification. But the reason that we developed this new system is in order to enable measuring performance. And in particular, this system really helps us understand the role that an airport fills in its community. So you can see here the columns. We've got primary activities, and then we've got factors for classifying the airports. And the primary activities, that really speaks to the role. So you can see at the top, commercial service or aircraft and aerospace manufacturing, and that then crosswalks with the airport readiness code, which really speaks to the size of aircraft that would operate at this airport, and then the population size. And so what these all blend together to say that a major airport meets commercial service and or aerospace manufacturing, the larger size of aircraft and the larger population density. And then as you work your way down through each classification level, you see that the role shifts a little bit, and the aircraft size decreases a little bit, and the population density also decreases. With one of the primary goals of this system plan to be examining performance, we talk about here how the system level goals, objectives, and performance measures translate into airport performance metrics. And so you can see the 8 goals here on the left. There are 23 airport metrics, and I'll go into those in a little bit more detail. So a metric is a means of measuring performance, and the ultimate goal is that these metrics then percolate from the airport level back up to the statewide level to help us measure performance across the state. You've got at the top the green box here, which is the optimal or the ideal, the target. Then down at the bottom, you've got these black boxes, which is a minimum, either a minimum standard or a minimum recommended, and then there's kind of a continuum or a spectrum in between. So a minimum standard would be something that is appropriate for WSDOT to expect and something that WSDOT is able to fund. Whereas a minimum recommended is something that WSDOT would like to encourage, but perhaps someone else should be responsible for administering that metric, and or it's something that WSDOT is unable to fund. So this is an example of one of the metrics, and you can see here on the left how it's got the classification level and then the airport description. And then you've got 2 columns, the minimum standard and the target. And in this case, because this goal is aeronautical and airport safety and is geared towards obstructions, it's going to be uniform across all classifications because this is an area of safety where there really is not a lot of leeway. But what you will find when you look in the system plan report is that many of the metrics, they kind of cascade down. The level of expectation is less as you move from level 1 to level 2 to level 3. And that's really meant to address that some airports have greater capacity and there's a higher expectation in some metrics than in other airport classifications. So this all blends together to take us to system performance. You can see here the critical aircraft, community demand, and the primary aviation activity that are part of the new classification system, which then connects with the airport metrics, which then results in a system-level performance of airports. I want to shift gears here and talk a little bit about emerging issues. This is something that had a very robust representation in the system plan. As many of you know, there are a lot of things going on in aviation. Certainly unmanned aircraft systems, some alternate fuels, some innovative aircraft technologies, the implementation of next-gen, and several other here on the list. And so these were actually conducted at the beginning of the study so that as we went through the study, we could consider these for the goals, the objectives, the metrics, and ultimately for the policy recommendations. But the reason this is important is because it also connects with alternative strategies. So as you receive the data from the system plan, now you want to do something with it. Well, what are we going to do? Well, that's where these alternative strategies come in. And they're broken down into the statewide, regional, and the individual airport level. In the interest of time, I'm only going to talk about the airport alternative strategies. And so really what this is kind of a formula or an equation. And you can start anywhere on this list, but really there are three groups. There's the focus areas, strategy categories, and objectives or outcomes. The focus areas are things that I've already talked about today. So you've got the 17 aviation activities, you've got the 23 airport metrics, and you've got the 8 emerging issues. And then over here you've got the outcomes. So for example, let's say you wanted to convey the airport's tie to the community, and you knew that there was a particular focus area that you wanted to address. So you would take that focus area and develop a strategy in order to accomplish that outcome. Now, in the system plan report, there are a number of these that were already developed with the assistance of a working group. And so airports could certainly start there, but we also wanted to provide the kind of the formula so that airports can develop their own strategies as well. Touch briefly on multimodal strategies. As you know, WASP is a very multimodal agency. But really the takeaway from this is that it's not one individual agency. It's really a collaborative effort at the local, the regional, and the state level to develop modal connections. And so really this chapter talks a lot about techniques and mechanisms for agencies at different levels of government to work together. And all this rolls together into policy recommendations. So the goals, the objectives, the system performance measures, and the airport metrics all connect into the policy recommendations. There are 30 policy recommendations. This is a snapshot, an excerpt from Chapter 9 of the system plan. And you can see that the goals are the framework where the policy recommendations have been developed. I encourage you to go and take a look at those and let us know if you have any thoughts about that. So that's the Washington Aviation System Plan, a very quick overview. I invite you to connect with me if you'd like to follow up. Also, you can go to the WASP.aviation website and pull down any of the chapters for the report and all the appendices. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you today.